The four Ds. So the four Ds come in contrast to the four Fs: fight, flight, freeze, fawn. The four Fs are trauma responses. So this is how we tend to respond when we feel like our back is against the wall and we're in a traumatic situation. But the problem is that in most cases, day to day, we're actually not in a life or death situation, but it sure does feel like it. And it can feel like that because we can come from complex trauma. So if you're anything like Jason, he grew up in a household where he was constantly told that he was a mess up, that he was a bad child, and that forms verbal abuse and some emotional abuse from his parents. He was also emotionally neglected. He didn't get a lot of hugs, didn't get a lot of love growing up. This is what we call complex trauma. So as Jason got into adulthood, when he starts living his life, he starts to notice a manifestation of some issues in his life. The partners that he would pick would always be emotionally unavailable, or they would be abusive to him in some way. It seemed like he also found himself surrounded by narcissists in his job, and he worked as a doctor. And so in the surgical ward or whatever, he had all these people who were working around him that were just egopaths. They were narcissistic and they were abusive, and they would always try to walk all over Jason. And Jason isn't actually a weak person, but he does find himself people pleasing, and he finds himself trying to find worth in his job, trying to find worth in how people treat him. And because he's attaching his worth to what he accomplishes and the way that he's treated, it's causing him to run into situations in day-to-day life and deal with them according to his trauma responses, which are fawn. People pleasing is a fawn response to trauma. So when we're utilizing that in day-to-day life, we're misusing something that could keep us alive in a life or death situation, and we're using it in a day-to-day situation. For instance, right now, if that door behind me comes bursting in and someone comes in with a gun, they say, "Give me all your money." Now I'm in a life or death situation. So I may choose to use the fawn response, which is, "Hey, take whatever you need. Here's some money over here. Here's where the jewelry is." And I'm like, "Go ahead. You have whatever you want." By me doing all of this, this is fawn response. So I'm basically saying, you take what you want so that I can survive. Fawn response is how we survive a life or death situation. But what can happen is if I continue to take that same fawn response and I go to work and I'm like, "Sure, no problem. I'll do all the hard jobs. You guys just take all the easy jobs." And then I'm talking to the boss and I'm just like, "Oh, no problem. I don't need my vacation time. I'll just give it up this year." And then I go home to my family. I'm just like, "Well, whatever you guys want, that's fine. I don't need to eat just as long as you guys eat." I'm going through my whole life now in fawn response. It's going to cause some problems. Now I'm depriving myself. I start to feel very sad. I feel like no one loves me. But the problem is I'm not loving myself. I start to feel very alone. I feel very abandoned. But the problem is I've abandoned myself, right? And so all of the trauma responses, fight, flight, freeze, fawn, are perfect for actual survival. It's pre-programmed and they're automatic. But it is inappropriate for day-to-day life situations. We need to get out of fight, flight, freeze, fawn. So how do we do this? Well, I want you to recall the four Ds. And the four Ds represent more balanced, less extreme ways of handling situations in our day-to-day life. So instead of fight, flight, freeze, fawn, then we have our four Ds. Let me see if I can pull that up for you guys here. So here we have discussion, disconnection, deliberation, deference. Discussion, disconnection, deliberation, and deference. These are the skills that we need to learn in order to handle our day-to-day life. So skills of discussion, disconnection, deliberation, and deference, and all of them are respective to the trauma response, right? So instead of fight, it's discussion. Instead of flight, it's disconnection. Instead of freeze, it's deliberation. Instead of fawning, we have healthy deference. Okay. If you're on this Zoom call, give me one sec. I'm going to try to pull my notes out here without messing up our screen share here. Okay, good. I think I did that appropriately. No, that was the wrong notes. Here we are. Thanks so much for your patience. So what we're going to do here today in our discussion, we're going to break down these different responses that we can have and how we can respond according to these skills. These are life skills. The 4Ds are life skills that we need in order to avoid going to the extremes, which are the trauma responses. So the 4Ds are life skills that we need in order to avoid going to the extremes, which are trauma responses. So the first one we're going to discuss is, discussion, ironically. So instead of going into fight response, we need to go into healthy discussion. So how does that look? Well, when we feel like there's an injustice in our life, we're in a community group and we feel like someone has kind of snubbed us, or they're giving us the more work, or they're blaming something on us. When we engage with our trauma response, we become too combative too fast. And we go, what is this? Is discrimination. And we start yelling, or we make a scene, kind of make a fool of ourselves. And we're trying to like stand up for ourselves because we feel very afraid and we feel triggered by the situation that's happening. But we're being triggered, which is trauma response. And what we need to be doing is getting into our 4Ds. So instead of yelling at everyone at the community center, looking like a Karen, or overreacting, we need to use discussion. Discussion involves the skills of assertiveness. The skills of assertiveness are our ability to skillfully express our wants, needs, desires. Assertiveness is our ability to skillfully express our wants, needs, and desires. This involves being able to advocate for ourselves. That is healthy discussion. Discussion is a life skill, which means we're going to have to practice it. It may not just come automatically to all of us. It may not come natural to us. We have to practice the skill of discussion, the skills of assertiveness, so that we have that ability to get out there and speak up for ourselves in a given situation. So we don't feel like we're being taken advantage of. So we don't feel like we're being discriminated against. And so the skills of assertiveness, or skills of discussion, you can find a write-up on this in my book, Mind, right? It's available on the website or Amazon. It's MIND. The acronym that we want to think of for healthy discussion skills is EAR, like ear, EAR. It stands for evade, assert, repeat. This keeps us right in the pattern where we need to be. It helps us to learn these skills. So you need to learn the skills of evasion, assertion, self-assertion, or assertiveness, and then to repeat the pattern. Okay, so this is very good if you have been working with me for a long time, or you've been coming to the meetings for a while. So even if you've reached the point of being healed, I challenge you, have you mastered EAR? Evade, assert, repeat. We have a lot of tools here that can be just clutch in your day-to-day life. Evasion, the skills of evading, means you have the ability to avoid getting into an argument with someone. You have to be able to evade the argument. One of the main ways this happens in your day-to-day life is your I don't want to call them an opponent, but your colleagues and the people around you, your counterparts, will bait you into an argument by asking you to defend yourself. It looks like this. Your assertion, hey, I don't want to go with you to the zoo. They say, why? In that, they've challenged you. Well, why don't you want to go with me to the zoo? At this moment, when you don't have the skills of evasiveness, you may fall into the trap of explaining yourself, which could also look like over explaining, which can also look like oversharing. And ultimately, any explanation opens you up for a counterattack. So now that you're explaining yourself, you could be defending yourself. We don't ever want to defend ourselves, because as soon as you defend yourself in a discussion, when you become defensive in a discussion, you are now in a fight. I repeat, whenever you're defensive in a discussion, you are now in a fight. So someone who's skilled in the art of discussion avoids being defensive. And so instead of saying, well, I don't want to go because my back really hurts and because I haven't really had any alone time, blah, 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 they will evade that bait, the why. The problem, by the way, is if they say, well, because my back hurts because I need some alone time, then the person will argue with them. You see, they will say, well, why don't you take some pain medication? Or they will say, well, you can get some alone time after we come back home. You see the problem here? The fact that you even opened yourself up to give them reasons was really unnecessary. You have the authority to decide what you're going to do, and you don't have to provide people reasons for it. Okay, so learning the skills of evading will teach you how to get out of over explaining or defending yourself. That might sound something like this. Hey, I'm not going to go with you to the zoo. Why? Well, regardless of why, I'm just informing you that I'm not going to be going with you, just so you know. Well, you're not giving me a reason. Yes, but I don't have to give you a reason. I'm telling you what's going to be happening. Okay, fine, whatever, be that way. And they leave. Bam, you did it. Healthy discussion. Why did you win? Because you avoided getting into an argument and you asserted what you wanted. Evade, assert, repeat, right? So we need those skills. So if you have the book, get into that chapter. It's under relationship tools, and study it, the ear technique. Evade, assert, repeat. We need these skills. If you don't have the book yet, go to YouTube, and you can learn about this on YouTube using the videos that are called "How to Evade Arguments," Roman Zanoni, "How to Evade Arguments," and Roman Zanoni, "Skills of Assertiveness." Also under a video called "Avoid Fight, Flight, Freeze." You can learn about these different skills. Very good. So how do we keep discussion from getting to the point of a fight? Well, one of the things that helps to temper discussion is the opposite on the scale, which is deference. One of the things that helps to temper discussion is deference. You see, all of these are actually the pull in the opposite direction of each other on the scale, and that's why they're positioned this way. So with discussion, to temper it, we have deference. Deference is our ability to show another person that they are important, right? And so now when I go in to talk to someone at the community center, I say, hey, Jan, you know what? You've been doing a great job running things at the community center, and I've always enjoyed volunteering here. Deference. But I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't the only one who was doing the pinups this year. Assertion. Do you think we can arrange to have this evenly distributed, or am I seeing this the wrong way? Assertion, using a question. Then she comes back. And you know what? Because I set it up so well, I set her up for success. She should be able to win this discussion, no problem. And we're going to be on the same page at the end of it. That's the skills of discussion. So we need to learn the life skill of discussion. And remember, your deference is going to temper that. So I'm utilizing all of my D's at the same time. Does that make sense? I'm utilizing all my D's at the same time. The deference softens the blow of us having to discuss something, of us having to have a confrontation. We might be in a situation where we have to speak to a family member about an issue. right? Maybe it's our mom or our dad, and we're adults, and they're always talking about our ex-husband. It's bothering us. That's a violation. Time to set a boundary, right? So we go to them and say, "Hey, I appreciate all of your support over the years. You've really done a lot for me. Deference. But I would ask that you don't talk to me about my ex-husband when I'm around you." Assertion. Bam. That's skilled discussion. See how the deference actually tempers the discussion. So we're not just hitting them over the head with the bat. Same thing. You got a nosy parent or grandparent that just stops over without asking. You say, "Hey, thank you so much for everything you've done for me." Deference. However, I would ask that you call me before coming over from now on. Healthy assertion. You're going over your family's house. "Hey, I'm really happy to see you, but I only have 15 minutes. I'm really happy to see you." Deference. "I only have 15 minutes." That's your assertion. Discuss. It means use your mouth to express your needs. Use your words to express your needs. That's a life skill. We all need it. We all need it. This making sense so far? Let's talk about disconnection. So instead of flight, which is, "Oh my God, I'm out of here," we just Speedy Gonzalez out of the room. Disconnection. Disconnection is our skill of detaching ourself or our emotions from a situation or another person. Disconnection is a skill of detaching. Disconnection is a skill of detaching our emotions or detaching our physical presence, our body from one situation or another. We have to do this to protect our well-being. We have to disconnect to protect our well-being. Is this making sense? So if we're in situations where, again, we get the feeling that we're uncomfortable, we may need to consider some level of disconnection, which is to remove our emotions or remove our body from the situation. We don't want to wait until things become unbearable. We don't want to wait until things become unbearable to disconnect. That's what leads us to flight response. What happens is we end up freezing. We freeze and we're sitting there, taking the abuse, taking the abuse, taking the abuse. And then we're like, "I can't take it anymore." And then we run away, right? Because we were going from one extreme and that leads us to going to the next. It's the rubber band effect. So instead of freezing and taking too much abuse, we need to disconnect early on, as soon as things are a bit uncomfortable. So your signal that you may need to disconnect is discomfort. It's discomfort. When you notice things are a little bit uncomfortable, that's your sign that you may need to disconnect. Does that make sense? So let's take some examples. Johnny's mother refuses to take her medicine. Johnny chooses to emotionally disconnect instead of trying to change his mother's behavior. You see how this could be healthy for Johnny's mental health? We feel like, "I got to do this. I got to save her life. I got to protect her. Mom, come on, take the medicine, mom, mom." And we're doing all that. It's not healthy. It's not healthy for us to try to control someone else. So what's healthy is healthy disconnection. Johnny said, "You know what? I tried to tell her about 1,000 times. Now I'm going to disconnect emotionally from whatever happens. And instead of trying to change her. So I will give her her reminders, but I'm emotionally disconnected, right? So you see how Johnny has found a way to balance it. Or someone working in an administrative position, it's my job to keep my boss on task, but then my boss always goes off task, and that's very frustrating. And then I'm going to get blamed later, right? By emotionally disconnecting, the assistant can realize that her position is just to remind him, not to control him. She says, "You know what? I disconnect from the outcome. So I'm just going to remind him, sir, you have a meeting in 5 minutes. I'll remind you again in 4 minutes. She comes back. You have a meeting in 60 seconds, and then you're done. And I've done my job. If he shows up for that meeting, that's up to him. I can't make him. I can't make him. That's healthy detachment. Sometimes we have to physically detach too, right? Disconnection involves removing ourself and our resources. For instance, Sandra feels that there's a guy at church that's a little bit creepy. So she chooses to remove her child from his presence whenever he attends. She chooses to remove her child from the presence of a man that she feels is creepy. Why? Again, she goes with the feelings. The feeling of discomfort gives her the prompt that she may need to set some boundaries, and she chooses to just disconnect, just detach. We're gonna go sit over here. she makes sure that her child is never around this man that she gets a bad feeling about. And by doing that, she's exercising healthy disconnection. Randall has a flying monkey brother. And so every time he gets on the phone with his flying monkey brother, his brother's doing oh, why don't you call dad? You should call dad. But the problem is, dad is a narcissist. And that's the reason why Randall chose to disconnect from his dad. So what should Randall do now? His brother's pressuring him. Why don't you call dad? So Randall says, bro, don't talk to me about dad. Otherwise, we can't talk if that's what you're going to talk to me about. Ooh, disconnection. He's saying, here's me, here's you. You see the healthy boundary that he's setting here? You can also see what's in there. He's got some discussion. He's speaking up for himself, but he's ready to disconnect. His brother says, come on, man, I think you're being unreasonable, Randall. Click. Hangs up on his brother. Healthy disconnection. His brother wasn't respecting his boundaries, so he needed to disconnect for a while. He loves his brother. His brother's a good guy. Brother's not a narcissist, but he's a flying monkey right now. So Randall's brother's not a safe person to talk to at the moment. When Randall's brother snaps out of the spell that he's under, so to speak, then he'll be a good guy again, and he'll be able to talk again. But not right now. He's being toxic. Right. So now, what helps us to temper our disconnection and keep balance is deliberation. What helps us to temper disconnection is deliberation. It's your ability to analyze and think about situations. To analyze and think about situations. If we don't deliberate and we're just disconnecting all the time, that's just flight. You see, healthy disconnection happens after we think it out and we see that that's the best possible option. Healthy disconnection is when we think it out, we see that that's the best possible option. So the next one we'll talk about is deference. Deference is our ability to give importance to others in a way that's balanced and it eases tension. Deference is our ability to give importance to others in a way that is balanced and eases tension. It's not as extreme as fawn. Oh my God, everyone just do whatever you want. I don't matter. I'm nothing. I'm invisible. Just walk all over me. I'll just serve everyone all the time. That's fawn response. We're just doing it all the time. Healthy deference is understanding that other people need to be given their just due. They need to be given a certain level of importance. And because you are a being of authority and power, you will come from your personal power and give. You will condescend. You will give someone importance because you have importance. You have power. So you will give someone else importance and power. Here's an example of this. You have to let a parent know that they're doing something that's just utterly wrong, maybe when they're babysitting your kid. So you tell them first how much you appreciate them. Mom, Dad, I love that you guys have been there for me and helping me to raise my son. This has been so great. It's allowed me to work. You guys are giving me free childcare. That's more than a guy could ask for. Thank you so much. I do want to bring to your attention that we use cloth diapers with our kid. If there's any way that you can that you can accommodate. I appreciate it so much. You see what I did in the beginning there? I used deference to help to soften the blow of the discussion. The deference, I was giving them importance. You guys are amazing. You guys are special. Thank you for doing what you're doing. That's deference. That's healthy deference. Or what if you're talking to someone who's lower in authority than you? What about your child? Yes, healthy deference, letting a child know how much you love them before correcting them, letting a child know you love them before correcting them. Hey, little man, come over here. Listen, you are my guy. I am so proud of you. I love you so much. You have so many talents, so many skills. And me and your mom know you are going to be something great when you grow up. However, the shoes on the floor with all the mud and the stuff like that, that's got to stop. Okay? Because this stresses your mom out and then that stresses me out. So do you think you can apply all that greatness to getting these shoes up too? Thank you so much. I appreciate that, little man. Put it right here. Good, right? What did I do there? Do you see the deference I gave to the child? And let them know they're important. I love them. I value them. And then I told them what the issue was. Even something as small as they left their shoes in the wrong place. Talk to the child with deference. Don't yell at the child. Come in the house. What is this? How many times do I got to tell you to pick up your shoe? Don't do that. That's not going to help anything. That's going to teach the child to respond out of fear, ups his levels of anxiety and makes him more susceptible to be an anxious adult. Talk to him, build him up, let him know what's going on. Be assertive, but you got to have the deference, right? We need deference when obeying superior authorities. In a courtroom with a judge, we need to defer properly to the judge. He says he wants everyone standing up when he comes in, then stand up. A police officer confronts you, he wants you to stand over here or back up. Back up. Do what the police officer tells you to do. It's proper deference, right? Why is that good? Well, in society, we need some hierarchy. Otherwise, everything descends into chaos when we have disagreements, right? So a certain hierarchical structure allows things to run orderly. So when someone has a position of authority, it's okay to show them the proper amount of deference for their authority. Does that make sense? Our deference, though, is tempered by the skills of discussion, the ability to speak up, use our mouth, and say, hey, just one thing, and advocate for our needs. Proper level of deference is tempered by our abilities to discuss, to speak up, and advocate for our needs. So hopefully this is making sense to you guys here. We need to be able to utilize all of these skills, all 4 of the Ds, and hopefully you have these in your notes now, so that we can handle every situation with the right level of response. The final one I didn't mention is deliberation. Deliberation is another word for meditation. It's to think, it's to pause and focus the mind on solving a problem. To deliberate is to analyze data in the efforts to solve a problem. Deliberation is a skill. Meditation is a skill, the ability to stop and think. It's a skill. So when my dad died, so I talked about that in our last meeting, right? My biological father died. I didn't have a very close relationship with him, right? I needed to deliberate on the response, right? I needed to deliberate on the response instead of responding immediately to what am I going to do? Who am I going to call? How am I going to? I took a moment, sat back in my car seat, and I thought about it. And as I analyzed the data and I analyzed our relationship that we had, which was very small, and I've probably only seen him a handful of times in my life, I was able to come to a reasonable decision on how much I would be involved in the arrangements from this point. And so in my case, I decided it would be best for me to contact the coroner and uh, do what was necessary to turn over my rights and responsibilities to plan funeral and all of that to another family member that would be closer to him. And so that's what I did. In doing that, I deliberated, right? But notice how all four D's get involved in the situation, right? With my deliberation, there was also deferring my responsibility and authority to another person. There was also disconnection, me saying, I'm not going to be the one to take this on. I'm going to back off. There's also discussion, making the phone call, talking to the coroner, and doing what needed to be done. If we respond immediately out of impulse, we may do too much or do too little and run away and say, I don't know what to do. I don't know who to call. And we don't do anything. So we carefully think things out. We consider things. I felt it would be uncomfortable for me to do funeral arrangements for this person that I didn't know so well, but it would be insensitive for me to do nothing. This is called reaching balance, and balance is healed. Staying in our 4Ds keeps us balanced. So think about how you can deliberate, right? And utilize the 4Ds. A child falls down and they hurt themselves, all right? If we don't think about it for just a moment, if we don't pause, we could do too much. Oh my God, oh, okay. Right now you're scaring the kid too much. We could do too little. Be like, come on, you're fine, walk it off. Too little, right? If we think it out, we use a proper amount of deliberation, and we realize, this is a moment where I can help the child to re-regulate. And then so you grab the child and you bring it close and you decide that after deliberating on it, there should be a healthy amount of deference and showing how important the child is. You might say, oh, let me kiss it and make it better. All right. And in doing that, you're helping the child to re-regulate. And there's the proper amount of involvement, right? And then all of a sudden the child goes, can we have macaroni and cheese? And then you see, oh, wow, they're comforted to the point they don't even remember what happened anymore. Good. Bam, you hit it. You nailed it on the head. You approached it with the proper amount of balance. You didn't do too much. You didn't do too little. You get booted out of your apartment early, you get a notice, and the notice says, your lease is up. Oh no, what are you going to do? Or the notice says your lease is going to be up a month earlier than expected. Right? Instead of the fight, flight, freeze, spawn, we deliberate on the situation. We may choose to call and discuss the situation. We may disconnect emotionally and say, hey, whatever happens, happens. It's not my fault. Right? And we show the proper deference in our discussion to those who are in charge. You get promoted for a job instead of, oh no, how am I going to handle this? Or over celebrating the situation. Proper amount of deliberation may lead you to discuss this with the people involved, right? To disconnect from the fears that you have that you're not going to be good enough and let go of the outcome. You're disconnecting emotionally by saying, you know what, I'm going to do my best, but whatever happens, happens, right? And showing a proper amount of deference to those who are now going to be working under you, right? So I think you guys get the idea. So we got to use the 4Ds instead of the 4Fs. So memorize these 4Ds. I want you to keep these in mind so that you can utilize them in your day-to-day life moving forward. And this is going to get you out of trauma response, out of trauma mode, and get you into healthy living, which is balanced.